and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Lord, grant us concentration that we may learn, listen, understand, have a peaceful mind, and remember that you're with us always. Amen. So this is our third fungus video. And in this video, we want to start by talking about symbiotic relationships with fungus. Fungi, unlike a lot of the other organisms that we've talked about so far this year, seems to have developed a large number of symbiotic relationships that help and support its growth. And we're going to talk about a couple of them here and then spend a little detail talking about lichens, which are extremely important in the overall ecosystems. So first, two examples of symbiotic fungi, the mycorrhizae. We talked briefly about mycorrhizae as it relates to plants. These are fungi that are able to grow into and around the roots of a large number of trees. As I said in our discussion of plants, somewhere in the order of 90% of all trees or all plants will have a mycorrhizae that are associated with them. And so as you can see in the roots here, this is a good example. There's a couple different types I'm not going to distinguish in this case. But what I want you to know is what is the relationship? Well, to the plant, the mycorrhizae are important to increase surface area, allow for more efficient delivery and pickup of nutrients in water or minerals in water. The plant, in its turn, is providing energy to the fungus in the form of carbohydrates that allow it to continue to grow. Remember, fungi are heterotrophic organisms, so they need that organism there. Another great example are the leafcutter ants. Okay? And so the leafcutter ants, and they're showing you a picture in this one from your textbook in the connection between there. The leafcutter ants are great in that they are actually, I would say without any problem, they are probably the oldest farmers in the world. So the leafcutter ants are going to go out, they collect leaf material, they carry it back to their ant hill or their ant colony. There are ants in there that will then chew up, they break down, add moisture to the leaf material, and then provide this to a fungus that's growing in there. And so the ants are providing food in the leaf material, and they also provide protection in that they're protecting the fungus because then they're going to provide for the fungus. The fungus itself, it's got a good life, except in maybe the problem is the ants are going to eat it. So this is the ant food source. The ants aren't able to digest lignins and cellulose in the leaves, but the fungus is. And so the fungus breaks it down, and that enables them to then consume the fungus as a food source. So this is two examples, and again, I always laugh because the one time when I was talking about this, a student said to me, raised his hand and said, "Well, that's not a symbiotic relationship." And I said, "Okay, what kind of relationship is that?" And he said, "That's a parasitic relationship because the ant is eating the fungus." I said, as we'll see in a couple weeks when we talk about these in the ecology section, we'll see that there is some question about what type of relationship this is. But both are dependent on each other. The ants, in fact, go as far as if their hill is disturbed or they have to move on to a new area, the queens or the head leaders will actually carry a packet of the fungus with them for them to establish a new colony. So very important relationship for the ant. The one type of symbiotic relationship with a fungus that I want to spend the most time talking about are lichens. Okay, and lichens, you see lichens every day when you're walking to class. Well, if you guys were here, you would see them, I should say. Lichens in this area, if you go up to the cemetery behind Bonnie and Jerry up there, on the cement you'll see these little sort of flaky looking organisms that live there. They have sort of a greenish gray hue. They kind of look like this one here. Okay. And so the fungus that is a lichen. Okay. And so there's a variety of different types of lichens that are present there. But lichens are very important because they're sort of they are a first organism that comes in to a new environment. They're sort of this starting species that will allow them to begin. And so what are lichens? Well, lichens are a symbiotic relationship between the fungus, that is what we see, okay, and a photosynthetic organism. Now, I say photosynthetic organism on purpose, okay, because it's not necessarily a plant or an algae. Most of them, many of them, have a green algae that is their photosynthetic relationship with. But some of them also contain cyanobacteria. Quite often, it is the photosynthetic organism that's giving the color to the fungus, to the lichen. Okay? Because they're going to contain the pigments that we talked about to collect the sunlight. So this is where the relationship comes from. The photosynthetic organism is going to photosynthesize, provide carbohydrates, an energy source for the fungus. The lichen, in its turn, is going to provide protection and moisture for the photosynthetic organism. And as we'll see in a minute, this relationship is shown in the structure of the lichen. Now, this is really where the key of their critical nature of lichens is that they can survive in a large variety of environmental conditions. Okay? Lichens can grow in everything from the tundra to the desert. Okay, probably not the desert, a little too dry there. But the point being that they can come in and they can live there. They're often foundation species. What does that mean? Well, a foundation species is an organism that can come in and begin to establish the growth in an area. So a lichen, it's able to attach to a variety. I mean, you could see this one's growing on rocks. So if there's, let's say, a volcanic eruption, kills everything. Okay? Slowly that rock cools, begins to break up. We now have lichens come in. Lichens can grow. Why can they grow? Because the photosynthetic organism is providing them with the energy they need. They are made up of these layers of hyphae that can attach right to rocks. They don't need open soil sources to be able to grow in. And as they grow over time, they provide nutrients that can now enter the soil as the rocks begin to grow up. Proteins, carbohydrates that will be broken down as they die, move into the soil. They can provide food for animals that can come in. So they're a very good foundation, beginning type of species that will come in that. Okay. And so the anatomy of a lichen is an important consideration with how this occurs. So I like to think of it this way. Okay. as a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Okay, and so it's going to sound a weird way to start. But the fungal layers, so you have an upper hyphae layer and a lower hyphae layer. That's the bread. Okay. And so the upper layer is providing the protection, for example, from keeping it from drying out, to allow protection for the photosynthetic organism. The lower hyphal layer is the attachment point to the substrate, so the rocks or the trees or whatever it's growing on. Now, in between that, you have two layers. And so the only proper way to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is put peanut butter on one piece of bread and jelly on the other piece of bread. And so the peanut butter, if you want to say here, okay, that is this loose hyphal layer, and that's going to allow for gas exchange. Okay. Why gas exchange? Well, gas exchange needs to occur because the photosynthetic organism needs carbon dioxide to make sugars out of, and it needs the oxygen removed so Rubisco doesn't get angry. Photorespiration. So that's the peanut butter layer. It's an open, loose fungal layer where air-gas exchange can occur, and there can be moisture that's kept in there. And the jelly layer, if you will, is where the photosynthetic organism is. Notice that it lives just underneath the upper fungal layer. Why is that important? It needs to be close to the sunlight. Without sunlight energy, there isn't going to be any photosynthesis occurring. So that's the anatomy, and that's the connection. Again, the important thing to note is that lichens can grow anywhere. And so as lichens begin to grow in an area, they can establish new nutrients in the soil and allow for continued growth by other organisms. Okay? So far we've been talking about fungi and their importance, whether we talk it as a symbiotic relationship, and we can talk about them as decomposers, breaking down the material, but there are harmful effects, okay, of fungi, and some of these that you can already know. Human diseases. Athlete's foot for most people is not a big deal, okay? It's a simple fungus that grows in the skin, little bit of irritation, maybe a little bit of cracking, but as John Madden would say, you get your tough actin, tenactin out, and it takes care of it. Okay. Now, people who are immune compromised, okay, AIDS patients, people who have been infected with the HIV virus, people who have had leukemia and gone through chemotherapy are immune compromised. They don't have the ability to fight off infections in the same way. Could be seriously harmful in that case. Spoiled food, okay? You see this, well, this is corn smut. We'll talk about that again in a little bit. But spoiled foods could be a loss of products. One great example of spoiled foods are the ergots. And the ergots are a particular type of fungus that release chemicals, again, chemical protection on their part, okay, that lead to hallucination, you know what I mean, seeing things. And they also are thought to be related to the Salem witch trials. Many of the women who were arrested or accused of being witches may have consumed rye that had this particular fungus in it. Obviously was a harmful effect of that. Another example are aflatoxins, okay? Or aflatoxins. And the aflatoxins, you know, if you know anybody who has a peanut allergy, it's not the peanuts that they're technically allergic to. It is a fungus that grows with the peanuts. And they release this aflatoxins. In addition to potential allergens, these have also been shown to be carcinogenic at high concentration and lead to neural degeneration. Both pretty bad symptoms. Now, human health issues, we do think of, loss of crops is important to us, but there's also a lot of plant health issues that have been related to this. One thing that you may not think of, but the largest organisms on Earth are fungi. And so we're looking at maybe 1,000 acres of forest in this picture here. And you can see all these trees that are circled, okay? They are dying because they have a fungal infection. And that's one fungus, one organism that's spreading out through this whole forest that is leading to the potential of deforestation. So when we talk about harmful effects, I think you're going to be aware of that. I always like to end and mention one last one, which is kind of a new, and that's Candida. Okay? And some of you have heard of Candida before. Okay? Some of you haven't. If you haven't, you're going to learn about Candida this morning. And Candida is a fungus that has been found. It's a single cell fungus that grows in the gastrointestinal tract of animals. In particular, in humans, this has been shown to be related to irritable bowel syndrome and some of the other diseases, common health problems related to that. There's also suggestive evidence that it can spark behavioral changes. In fact, there's some evidence that shows an infection in your gastrointestinal tract with Candida can stimulate you to eat more sugar, because that's what the Candida is able to digest most easily. Many of you are aware that there are toxic mushrooms, okay? Why would there be toxic? Well, toxic mushrooms are mushrooms that are making neurotoxic or hallucinogenic chemicals that if we consume them are hallucinogenic or toxic to us. Why is this? Well, quite often they're using it as a way to disable prey. Okay? So fungi that are living in plants or living on plants will take the chance to protect itself again from these nematodes, such as the nematodes or other organisms, but also is going to use this to disable it so it can digest it, again, looking for a nitrogen source. Death cap mushrooms are not hallucinogenic. The hallucinogenic compounds are different. Obviously, they're neuroaffective. Death cap mushrooms actually contain a chemical called phalloitin. You'll learn more about that if you have cell biology lab next year. But phalloitin binds to actin proteins and prevents digestion. It basically shuts down muscles. And so your gastrointestinal tract and your heart eventually shut down, and of course, you need a heart to be able to survive. But there are a lot of beneficial properties to fungi, okay? They are a great food source, easily to digest and nutritious. Admittedly, they are an acquired taste, and some people don't like the taste of mushrooms, okay? I don't want to sound overly confident in this, but anybody who doesn't like the flavor of mushrooms is wrong. They're very good, okay? We also know yeast and a number of other fungal species that are used for baking and brewing, okay? The yeast break down the sugars, produce alcohol, produce carbon dioxide, which we catch inside gluten to be able to make bread. And finally, antibiotics. Penicillin, I think everybody should know. One of the first antibiotics that was identified was isolated accidentally from a fungus. We've now found other additional fungal metabolites. Again, these would be the secondary metabolites, not required, that are present there, that are actually being used for the protection of the fungus. Fungi, just like animals and plants, are subject to bacterial infection. And so the fungus makes these chemicals to protect itself from microbials to be able to do that. All right, so we've seen something like this before. This is corn smut, okay? And I think most everybody here that would find something that looks like that on their corn would probably throw it away, okay? There are parts of this country where that is a delicacy, okay? Rather than throwing it away, they promote that growth. And it's supposed to have a very unique taste to it. I've never tried it. I probably would, given the opportunity. But I haven't had that opportunity yet, okay? So that's our discussion of fungi. As always, if you have any questions, please post them on the Schoology discussion board or contact me and I will get you an answer. Thank you.